Hi, my name is Sue Dewhirst and I'm a Director of Evolve Design Limited. In the second of our blogs, we're looking at what standards to build to. Who we are? Well, Evolve Design was established in 2007 and we're chartered architectural technologists as well as also being passive house designers. We also like to do SAP energy assessments, so we're able to offer a complete package to all of our clients, whether they're doing new build or refurbishment. We specialise in designing low energy and passive house homes using either traditional, timber frame, SIPS construction, kit homes, but what's important to us is the orientation of your building to make the most of solar gain. What we're going to be looking at in this blog is comparing the recent changes to the building regulation standards compared to passive house design. And you can see from the diagram on the right the differences between a modern home, a passive home, and probably one that was built anything up to 10 years ago, and the extra heating costs and also the losses that you're getting through your thermal envelope. So in 2014, April this year, the building regulations changed. So now that we need to look at the alterations that were made to Part L. This is the area that looks at the energy use and is the same mandatory requirements in England and Wales. What they're now asking for is additional energy efficiency to the whole building. Building regulations are mandatory requirements. These have to be achieved. And what has been introduced into the new SAP is the feed target, the fabric energy efficiency. It's no longer sufficient to have a leaky house, but then put lots of photovoltaic or other renewables into your home and offset the fact that your house is still hemorrhaging energy. You've now got to get a very good fabric efficiency before you get the benefit of renewable feed-in tariffs. And also, when you're thinking about insulation, it's now not sufficient just to look at putting extra in the loft. You've got to think of where you have cold bridges, thermal bridges occurring in the construction so that you can insulate in all those problem areas. So in the new building regulations, what they've done is to introduce a table showing the different thermal values that are the minimum requirements you really need to be aiming for. Not to say that this is the lowest you can go, because obviously you have got the passive, but for building regulations to ensure that you pass your SAP requirements, these are the minimum targets. As we say, the building regulations have changed, and what's happened because of the Welsh Assembly government incorporating the Code for Sustainable Homes within their requirements, in England, we're now having to get a 6% improvement over the old regulations, but in Wales, that is 8%. So if you're buying a new home in Wales, it's going to be more energy efficient than one in England. The SAP that we have to compare our buildings to stands for the Standard Energy Assessment Procedure. And what we're looking at here is not only the energy, but also the environmental impact of your home on our environment, so the CO2 emissions. So SAP is asking how much fuel do you use and what type of fuel is it? Is it a fossil fuel? Is it natural gas? Is it LPG? How efficient is your heating and hot water systems? Have you got insulation on your hot water tank? Are you using a combi boiler whereby you just have the hot water as and when you need it? What is your air tightness like? Up until the recent changes, we were allowed to have an air tightness of 10 air changes per hour. And that's equivalent to opening a double garage door once for 5 minutes every hour. And just think how much energy you are losing because of that. The new regulations have now reduced that down. But what we want to do is also think about the complete thermal performances of all the surfaces, not just the walls and roof, but look at your floors, look at the perimeter, and look at your windows. And the orientation is so important. It's good to have solar gain, but what you need to ensure is that you have good ventilation so that you don't overheat in the summer. So, once you've asked all these questions, just think what the next step's going to be, because by 2016 we need to be looking at zero energy. That's the next change in the building regulations. And the reason for this is simple. Our fossil fuel reserves are running out, as are our gas stocks, and we're going to have to start buying in from maybe countries that aren't very friendly. So really you want to try and eliminate the possibilities of having fuel poverty. This is really important. And this is where Passive House comes in, because what we're wanting you to do is just meet building regs, but to a much higher standard. So we're looking at superior levels of insulation surrounding the whole building. It's built to provide you with a thermal comfort so that you're getting a level of around 22 degrees as an internal living environment, regardless of what the external temperature is. And the Austrians and Germans, being as they are, they've actually written an ISO standard for this, because what they're wanting to ensure as well is that you get excellent air quality. It's no good having high levels of insulation if it turns into being a sweaty little box that isn't very healthy to live in. So if we look at the building regulations versus Passive House, with building regulations now, we've got to look at our fabric energy efficiency, and that brings it down now to having to achieve on a detached property 46 kilowatt hours per square metre per year. But if you compare that to passive, we're down to 15 kilowatt hours. So it is going to make a difference, and this is really what you need to be working on. Lower targets have now been set with the building regulations for flats and for terrace properties, but if you're building a detached or semi-detached property, you've got to be below this 46 kilowatt hours per square metre level. The target energy efficiency calculation is looking at the whole thermal envelope. It's also looking at all the junctions, all the thermal bridges as we know them as, between your floors, walls, roof and windows. What we want to make sure is that the psi value is as near to zero as it can be. And in passive properties, it's even possible to get this to a negative figure. The house on the right is showing a typical timber frame construction, and where you can see all the vertical lines is showing you where the energy is escaping through that timber frame. So although timber frames are thought to be extremely thermally efficient buildings, and they are, you've got to now look at how you can reduce the energy that's being lost through those timber studs. Windows are also an area that lots of people seem to disregard. They see an A+ rating splashed across them and they think all's good. But what you need to look at is the installed thermal performance. Remember, it's not just the glass, it's the frame and the edges. It's very easy to get a very good thermal performance through the centre of the piece of glass. It's not so easy to get that through the frame. So what you need to be asking your window supplier is, what is your installed thermal performance? If we look at thermal mass, this is also very important in how your home works for you. The mass of the building enables it to store the heat, and that can be from solar gain, which is very good. The inertia then that the building system shows allows it to store the heat and then put it back into the environment as the day progresses, so that you don't get immediate temperature changes. And with temperature changes, you also get humidity changes. So the best thermal mass you can get is going to give you a far better living environment. So when you're considering what building products to use, concrete has a very good thermal mass, whereas lightweight products, such as timber frame and SIPs, don't have the thermal mass to enable them to store the energy through the day. Solar gain is very important, and that is why the orientation of your building is important to us when we're designing. We want to be able to control the solar gains and losses to avoid overheating. That's why when we're designing, we look at roofs, we look at trees, we look at other things to give you natural shade through the day. So regardless of which building system you're looking to use, make sure you consider the solar gain. So what you want to make sure is perhaps to have your windows facing south, because then you're getting the majority of natural sun and daylight through the day, but to have maybe a concrete floor so that the concrete absorbs the solar gain and then transmits it back into the environment through the day. With all of this though, we look at mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, and then the system is able to capture the solar gain and transfer that throughout the rest of the property. So when you're looking at your design, consider using concrete floors or solid wall construction or an element of those in your design to take advantage of the solar gain. High level of insulation is also extremely important. Passive homes require a much higher level than you do with standard building regulations. What we're looking at here is with the new building regs, we're looking at U values through the wall of 0.18, whereas with a passive house, depending on its location, you'd be looking at between 0.08 to 0.15. And orientation, again, is so vitally important, and the positioning of windows. With passive house, we're also looking at a much improved air tightness. Building regulations are now 5 air changes per hour, which equates to just a single garage door being opened and losing all your energy for 5 minutes. Whereas passive house, we have to be down below 0.6 air changes. And that could be the difference of having a cat flap and not having a cat flap, or having a doorbell or not. So we're looking at real finite details. But the thing to consider really is, can you take elements of this and put this into your standard build? You don't have to go all the way with passive house, just use the principles because it makes good sense. And it is all about attention to detail. Triple glazing is also an essential part of passive house design. This is because it provides you with a much higher thermal performance. You're looking at installed U values of around 0.08. But what you've got to make sure is your provider is giving you those installed values and not just what's going through the centre of the pane of glass. Air tightness around the window is also critical, because we've got to get down to less than 0.6 air changes. We want to make sure that you're not losing air around the windows and you keep that level of comfort. So again, with passive house and also with building regulation homes that have got excellent air tightness, you need to look at whole house mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. What this means is that you're actually capturing the energy that's been used to heat that cold air and putting it into the cold, clean air that's coming in. So in effect, how it works through the heat exchange unit is to extend out the dirty cold air and bring in warm, clean air, so that you're always getting a healthy living environment. So the choice is yours, really. What will you choose? Whatever it is, aim for passive house standards. They make good building sense. And always, please, put fabric first. In our next blog, we're going to be looking at the range of building systems that are available to you. But in the meantime, if you'd like any information, please go onto our website or email us. Thank you. Speak to you soon.